if you see people around you work so hard, but still going nowhere in life or still struggling, how do you actually find the motivation to show up? Or nobody's even supportive of you focusing on your education. So how do you find that motivation? So after we tested so many things, we came out and failed many, many times. We came up with this framework called
Welcome to Brave. Learn from Southeast Asia's best tech leaders. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. No BS on success. I'm Jeremy Au, venture capitalist, serial founder, Harvard MBA, science fiction nerd, and dad of 2 daughters. Every week, we debate startup news, interview changemakers, answer listener questions, and share personal insights. Join our movement of over 40,000 members and get transcripts, resources, and community at www.bravesea.com. Stay well and stay brave. Hey, Janine, good to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been 3 years since your last episode with Brave, and I just thought it'd be nice to just catch up and talk a little bit more about what's happened since then.
Time flies.
Could you share a little bit about who you are?
So I'm Janine from Soft Education. What Soft Education does is it's a social enterprise that uses AI and gamification to make learning accessible to youth who most need it. So to date, we have already reached over 1 million learners, equipping them with life skills or other academic skills, so both, to prepare them for the future. And we do it in an engaging and impactful way. I'm very passionate about using technology for good and also very passionate about learning and education. So when I'm not working, I'm using pedagogy and life sciences that I've learned to practice on my very patient rescue cat.
Yeah, so, obviously you've been doing a lot of pedagogy and teaching so many people around the world your social enterprise and education. What do you think has been the biggest changes for you over the past 3 years from your perspective?
Obviously, AI is a very big change for everyone. More and more teachers are using AI in their teaching, but then on the other side, more and more students are using AI to do work for them or, doing any groundwork or research for them. So some are using AI in a, I would say, positive way, as in they learn together with the AI, and some are just using AI in a very lazy way, assigning their assignments to AI. So there's both sides. So AI is one part, but then for the bottom of the pyramid, I think what's exciting is infrastructure is continuing to improve for the bottom of the pyramid. And I think more and more phones become accessible. So that part I find very exciting. And also, even from the AI perspective, there is now LLMs that could run on small devices like Raspberry Pis, completely offline, where bottom of pyramid can actually interact with. So I think that is, for me, very exciting.
Yeah, so I think AI obviously is a big part of it. And I thought that would be an interesting angle, which is like AI and education. So I think there's several stakeholders, like you said, right? So there's teachers, there's kids. Are you worried? Are you happy about it? Which parts of it are you most thinking about?
When I talk to the teachers, I think that many of them are mostly worried about it because they now do not know if the students are actually learning or even they're doing their own homework. And in the schools where teachers are more AI literate, we find teachers using AI also to find out if the students are using AI. And I've heard complaints about students actually not using AI, but sort of accused of using AI. So I think some sort of regulation or some framework is required in the traditional education setting. So that part I'm actually, I don't think it's going to be easy to work out. So there's a mild worry there. For the big part, especially for the audience that I'm working with, which are marginalized youth, right? I think AI is very exciting because this means that with AI, they get to explore, ask questions, and learn at their own pace. For us, we even integrated an AI coach within our platform at bot.ai. So at the coach, so at is able to give our students career guidance or even encouragement or just be their therapist sometimes, just someone to talk to and also ask questions that they don't understand, from their schoolwork. So I think that allows students who can't afford like tuition or who do not have resources around them to have at least a one-to-one teacher to be able to journey on their learning journey. So I think that is very exciting. And I think there's enough evidence to show that one-to-one teaching actually helps a B student become a A student. So yeah, I think this is so exciting.
It's exciting because there are different groups, like you said, right? And I think teachers can get worried. But for students, it feels like, yeah, you have a teacher that's available. The person is always there. The person doesn't shows up to school.
And the AI teacher is so patient.
Yeah.
Don't scold you.
Exactly.
Non-judgmental.
And I think it's interesting because most of us, when we think about education tech, we're obviously talking about middle class or upper class children. And some of them obviously are going into super AI mode, and some of them are going totally offline. But I think for people who are disadvantaged, I think you have the best lens on that group. And that's frankly like 80% of the global population, right? And these are folks who are not very literate in English, math, bad internet, bad electricity. How are you finding, what's different about their behaviors in accessing or using AI from your perspective?
Yeah. I think what is interesting from our observation and even from our latest workshop that we have done for our learners. So basically our learners learn and exchange for points on our platform to join the workshop. And it's a AI workshop that we co-organized with Micron. And we have got our students asking questions like, how does AI actually help the people from the bottom of the pyramid? How does AI help people who have issues accessing internet to advance? So I think such questions are in my students' minds, which I was actually secretly really proud of. So these things, and also they ask AI to advise on things that could help their parents even, because in many of the marginalized communities, if the students or the kids have some access to education, many times they are actually already more educated than their parents, right? So is in a situation where the parents don't necessarily know more than them. In this space, I see AI really not only helping them help themselves for the future, but also help them be able to perhaps guide their parents or their communities better. And especially the demographic that I work with are youths. So they are in the position to create change in their community. So I think like in the more privileged developed world, I'm not saying always, but it's more common that the parents know more than the kids.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, and if I as a parent don't know the answer, I can always use my own AI.
Yes.
Get my answer and then tell my kid what the answer is, right? So both the parent and the kids can both access AI in a upper or middle class country or strata. But I think that's actually a really interesting piece, which is there's a bit of a power component, right? I mean, because like you said, like parents obviously are sending their kids to school because they want their kids to be educated.
They want the
But in this case, they're not only educated at the point of the teacher, the local teacher, they're being educated at the point of like super godlike IQ.
Not godlike.
Well, you only test like 90+% on legal exams and 90+ on medical exams and can do all of it simultaneously.
Yes.
I would say that's godlike to me. I can't do a math exam, a legal exam, and medical exam at the same time, right?
Yeah. This is fun. That's what's really interesting is to see how different children, different child use AI differently in their own local context.
Is there like a conflict as a result? Like, kids who are now suddenly really smart, but also now AI would give them advice on career or give them advice on ethical decisions? Because previously, if they're educated by a very smart math teacher, the math teacher was just teach them math and maybe some small life advice. But there's a bit of a, scale disparity, but also a lot of domain diagonal
biasness based on the human that you're interacting with, right?
Yeah.
So how we have designed our AI coach is to work with the learner to figure out where their interest is and where their strengths are rather than what they're most exposed to.
Yeah.
So with that, slowly craft out some possibility of career paths that they can consider. And obviously we consider nuances like gender bias, right? We don't want our AI to recommend a girl who is 16-year-old in, say, Balikpapan to be a nurse or secretary, right? We want the AI to be more aware of such a potential bias and really look at each learner as an individual to guide them along their paths.
I mean, that's interesting, right? So maybe let's just say the dad is like, okay, I'm uneducated. I'm a blue collar worker
Yeah.
in a factory. I want my
Yeah.
daughter to learn English and math.
Yeah.
And because I think that my daughter will have a good life as a nurse or as a secretary. And then suddenly this AI is talking to my daughter, and then the daughter is suddenly saying, I can be a soldier or an astronaut. This is an example, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So, I mean, how do you see that? Because it is also like a little bit of a values shift as well, right? To some extent, even with what you're doing as well.
Yeah. So I think that we do encourage, obviously, the learner to communicate and engage their parents, right, when they're thinking about their future. And I guess the positive thing is that many, marginalized communities are actually quite closely knit, right? So perhaps if I'm a girl who wants to be a astronaut and my dad does not know what it is, I could actually ask the coach, like, how do I explain this in an easy manner to my dad who's not exposed to such things, right? So I think it's just really exciting to be able to help learners think outside of what they see in only their immediate community, because in the past, most people think about career opportunities just from what they see from what their parents do or what their relatives or neighbors do, right? But today, because the world is so interconnected, it really opens up so much possibilities for people to explore.
I'm just imagining what would be the ethical ramifications if you told your AI to be like, the instructions was like, please take the voice of your local community advice to you in terms of career, right? But isn't it so? It's kind of interesting, right? Because there's a dynamic there, right, between, I guess, your organization as an educator, parents, students, and obviously what has worked historically and what's going to work in the future, right? So I'm just kind of curious how.
I think it's also important to remember that we can't make the decision or push a person to a certain decision, but we just need to let the person know that the learner knows that these are the different opportunities, and these are some considerations, some things that you might want to think about, and maybe this is what your community would likely think, have that individual, make their own decision. And I think perhaps because we work with youth, so they're a lot older. So at that point, they would have some thoughts of their own as well. I mean, we've all been through the adolescent stage where perhaps we have been horrible and stopped listening to our parents.
Then you go to your AI, it's like, my dad wants me to be an engineer.
Yeah.
And
Doctor, lawyer.
A doctor, lawyer. Dear AI, I hate him so much. Please tell me why I should say this. Yeah.
I have not tried that, but it will be interesting for me to test that out. Yeah.
So, but what's interesting is that obviously, AI is just going to keep getting better and better, right?
That's right.
And then obviously youth are going to use more and more AI. So what do you think that end state or that future is going to look like from your perspective?
Yeah. I think the end state is really everything distills down to the first principle, right? So how you ask questions, how you think, how you analyze things, right, becomes a lot more important than the volume of knowledge that you can store in your brain. What does that mean? I think a lot more work needs to be placed into the foundational skills. Like when we talk about literacy, it's no longer how much vocabs that you can remember, but really, can you actually comprehend what you have read, right? Math is not whether you can memorize the different formulas or theorems, but can you apply? Can you analyze, right? Using, the analytical skills that we're supposed to train with math, right? Sometimes we get lost with the learning objectives of, okay, the objective is to make sure you are able to use, solve quadratic equations and things like that. But the actual, what's the real objective of teaching that is the analytical skills, right? So I think that skill, that training of how to think becomes even more important. Yeah. So that foundational skills.
Yeah. What would you say to, like, I can imagine a teenager saying, I don't need to learn any of this stuff anyway because AI can do it for me.
Right.
You're just like, oh, Judy, you're asking me to learn how to do math, but I don't need to learn how to do math because it does it for me, right? So, I mean, how do you react to that?
Yeah. So I would say I would say that, or lead him to think that yes, AI can do it for you, and AI can do it for, in fact, everybody now, since everyone have access to AI, right? So then what makes you different from others, right? What's your talent, or how, if you and another person is, in the run for the same job, same position, what's going to make you stand out? So I would ask the youth to really think harder in such questions, right? Is there some field that he's particularly interested or she's particularly interested in, or something, a direction that they want to pursue? And yeah, engage the AI to learn to go that journey with them, rather than, because else, if we were to just depend everything on AI, we stop thinking. And I don't think AI is really meant to help us, think for us or take over our lives. We are still human, right? What do you think?
I mean, it's tricky, right? I mean, in the short term, I was reading this interesting research paper from MIT about AI empowered accounting. So they're basically looking at the data for accountants, senior versus junior accountants, using this AI powered accounting system. And what they found was that senior accountants did a better job because they were able to shift a lot of their low level tasks like manual data entry into the AI. And so they were able to free up time to do like customer Q&A and do more high value work. And they were also better able to override the AI when the AI was wrong. And they were also able to make a decision even if the confidence was low. Versus for junior accountants,
Because they're thinking, right?
yeah, they understand what's going on. Whereas for junior accountants, when they hit first of all, most of their work is more low level stuff, but they can't shift to high level stuff because they don't know how to do the high level stuff. And then two is like when the AI is low confidence, they don't feel confident to override the AI decision. So they can't challenge the AI. And also when the AI is confused, they can't step up and actually provide the right solution or guide it to the correct conclusion. Exactly. So that was an interesting dynamic where I think the interesting dynamic, which is high value people get more value from AI than less experienced people.
Yeah, exactly. And also, it might not just be experienced, but the ability to think, right, and be critical about what AI gives back to you, because you might not have a lot of experience, but if you think critically and continue to, ask AI, hey, why are you suggesting this? Why is this like that, right? And work together to improve yourself. I think somebody who has no experience could improve very quickly. So I guess we were talking about many fresh graduates from universities today struggle to find jobs. It's not only in Singapore, but anywhere in the world. And it's exactly like what you said. The low level jobs are no longer available because AI can easily do that. I've talked to some friends, even, in VC firms that we talked about previously. Now they're not hiring junior analysts because AI can do all the job. So what does that leave? What future is there for fresh graduates today, right? So that's why you can't just use AI and say, I don't need to learn all this. I just use AI, because that's really not going to help you for your future.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that, historically you needed junior people to do data entry, take meeting minutes. And in fact, that's how I started my career. I was all those people taking notes, and then I had to send off. And then my supervisor would say, Jeremy, you didn't, format it correctly. That was the entry level job.
Okay,
right?
so you're not performing as well as really.
I mean, back then, yeah, obviously, I mean, I was, you start as an intern and then you become a junior associate consultant. Yeah, I mean, no way was I.
Me too. I started as a junior software engineer. So I'm perhaps correcting bugs that you could just pass it to AI and.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I was definitely doing it slower. I was definitely more expensive.
And I will make more mistakes.
Yeah. And I only work, 40, 50, 60 hours a week instead of 24/7.
And I need food.
I need lunch break.
Oh no, it's making us sound really mean.
But I mean, the reality is that we were that junior person, and we were given the opportunity because we had to do that junior piece. So I agree with you. I think there's a dislocation, right? I mean, to me, it does feel like the 2008 financial crisis, where a lot of people just never got jobs for several years because of the financial crisis in America. I feel like there's going to be a similar dynamic now, where there's going to be like a few years where a whole generation of people who were trained to do a certain type of job is going to get automated away, or is currently getting automated away?
I think that there will definitely be new opportunities coming out, but what is that? I think it's still, just new jobs, new types of professions are going to be created, right, as we go. But practically speaking, at the future, as we can still see it, if you want to stick to the, knowledge worker, then you need to really be AI proficient, right? Or there are a lot of, vocational jobs that really need people. Right? I think this need will definitely increase in Singapore, but in Australia or in Europe, where plumber, F&B worker, service staff are paid really well. I remember in the F&B staff hotel that my husband was working in, they were paid like $50 an hour.
Yeah.
To provide that service, and that job's not going away, right? Because people still want that human touch. So there's still a lot of jobs that's available, but it's not the traditional attractive, knowledge worker jobs.
Yeah, I mean, in Singapore, so many undergraduates, they all want to do banking, right? So I remember I was teaching a class, and then I was like, how many of you want to be entrepreneurs? And it was like, one or two hands.
How does that make you feel as an entrepreneur?
I mean, it's interestingly, it made me feel a bit sad, obviously. But also, I think was good, because I think if I was an American and asked people, say, who many people want to be an entrepreneur, probably like maybe at least 10%. As an example, right? And, this was at NUS, and, like, there are so many factors in Singapore that make it doable for people to be entrepreneurs, in the sense that, I mean, you heard it from Janine, the secret advantage of being an entrepreneur is to live with your parents, because you don't have to pay for rent, you don't have to pay for food.
That's right.
You only get the social ostracization by your parents every single day.
That's
saying,
right.
Boy, what you do for work every day, girl?
Yes.
When are you going to be a banker?
Yeah, it's really sad that with such cushions,
correct,
we're still not taking risks.
Yeah, so I would say that. I would say that the thing is, I think there's so many cushions in Singapore. I think people feel like, I think they're pushing for status jobs, high status jobs. It's like hard jobs that are hard to get. And so a banking job feels hard to get because there's a lot of people competing for it. So I should compete for it. And I think that's a big part of the class that, I spend some time deprogramming, in the sense that, don't get me wrong. I think in general, things that are valuable, people want to rush for it. And so there tends to be, some dynamic to it. But not everything that's high status is the right job for you.
I think that we are still like one generation down from, the generation whereby only the people who can make it become entrepreneurs, because there are no, you can't find jobs anywhere, right? I remember like my contractor, he has a primary 6 certificate, and that's his higher education. And so he became an entrepreneur, renovation, right? So that memory is still very strong. So therefore, I think to our generation, it's still like not so good. It's like a worst case scenario job. But I hope really for the generation below us, it would be, they could be more brave. Yeah, look at your brave t-shirt.
I know, right? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tricky part. And I think that's going to be part of the solution to the problem you raised, which is what are kids going to do? I think now that those junior jobs don't exist, I think one part of it is some people will become more entrepreneurial and build their own jobs. So I think that's one. I think the other part is a group of people.
Because they have no choice.
Well, I guess just like last generation, I guess. But now it's more like the banks are not hiring me because they are so efficient now.
Yeah.
And they're moving those jobs to Malaysia.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they're doing, literally. They announced a lot of those middle office jobs are getting moved to Malaysia and getting digitized at the same time.
Yes, that's true. Malaysia, the Philippines.
Yeah, exactly, right? So this is outsourcing, right? So I think people have to create their own jobs as one. I think the other one is people have to accelerate their own learning. I've noticed that some people who are fresh grads are actually very scary because they're just smarter than when I was several years older, maybe many years older. Because when they kind of like enter the workforce, they've already done so many internships, they're already using AI, and they're getting so proficient. And an example of that would be like, when I was a VC, right? And I was doing a VC for a couple of years. So for me, it was just very much like, okay, I've done this after being entrepreneurial, being a consultant and everything. And then I think obviously there were two groups of people who were fresh grads applying. There was a group of people who were applying for a VC job because it was high status. It was like, oh, it's very hard to get, so I wanted to do that. And they were kind of like very fuzzy, like, oh, a VC job will unlock so many career paths, and put these big quotation marks because they're not true. But it's just like it's like a very fancy job, right? And so they felt like it was going to give them a very fancy career path. I think. And then, but out of that group, I would say 1% of them were like just super laser focused, and they knew exactly what a VC job was. They had already been doing sourcing. They had already been writing memos. They knew exactly what VC was. They already did the research. They knew what the next job for them after that was going to be. So they were just, I don't know what's the word, like they were like, I don't know, perfect hires. And that job didn't even exist. I mean, I graduated in 2011 in university. VC as a job didn't exist as analyst. And now in 2022, 23, that people are coming out who are like,
that's the job.
That's the job I want, and I already nailed it. I've somehow already managed to get 2 years of job experience by myself, right? You know, so I thought, so that to me feels like another angle that some people have, which is they're just going to like.
But those are really the top tier, right, of the graduates, because not everyone have that ambition, are as ambitious or as hardworking, I guess, as like doing different internships before graduation. Even right now in self-education, we've got interns applying to us, 14-year-olds, already having done like, you know, a few websites for this and that, and already have work experience. I'm just like, you're 14. And and they are really impressive. But that spirit, we're still thinking how we can teach that more. You know, having self-agency, because I think that's going to be another very important factor, right? That not makes or breaks, but that could really highly improve somebody's opportunities and potential. Because I tried to do that for my alma mater, I somehow couldn't get that bunch that I was speaking to even reach out to me for internship or reach out to me for something, you know.
So you're like one of those speakers who are like,
I feel like putting my school down, so I'm not gonna mention.
Wait, I want to hear. Wait, so were you this school?
Yeah, I was an alumni talking to my.
And you said, please reach out to me.
Yeah, no one did. Heartbroken, and those guys are top from a pretty good school. You know, why are they not taking charge of their lives? And then now you have got folks who are really, you know, taking their future in their own hands and learning as they go. And now, because of the access that is being solved, you have access to, like you said, a godlike teacher that can teach you anything. So now because I think in the past, almost the opportunity somehow there's a barrier, right? Okay, I can't go to Harvard because it's so expensive. Even just paying for SAT is expensive, right? And so, but today you probably can get a lot of good quality education already online. So I think that gap is minimizing for people who don't have a lot of resources. I'm really excited, but I don't know what's going to happen to people with no agency.
That's a good question. What happens to the kids with no agency? Well, some will discover agency through self-work, talking to AI as a therapist, spirituality, self-work. Well, some people may discover agency because, you know,
and some maybe life will nudge them to agency. Like raise two kids for you. I am getting out.
You're like, sorry, you have become a parent, so you must learn to work so that you can feed your kids.
Yes. So.
I mean, that's most of life, I would say. Yeah. So I totally empathize with that position.
So life does have a way to nudge you to.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, because, you know, you have to work and you have to work in order to feed yourself and feed your community. So I think that's part of the biological piece, right? Which is like the hormone for movement is the same for the hormone for motivation, right? You know.
Yes, that's right.
Dopamine, right? So
that's right.
So, you know, the point of it was that you're supposed to reward you for moving to get food, feed yourself.
That's right.
So
where did we get here?
I guess we're getting here because we're saying it's like, okay, you know, if you have kids who don't have agency, well, I'll tell you another thing is they could play computer games, a lot of it. I mean, I think that's one of the best parts about computer games is that it makes you feel like you achieve something and that you leveled up and you learn a new skill and you get rewarded for it. I mean, I don't know. That's one of the, you know, a computer game is a world within the real world, right? And so I think that's one of the most, like, personally, when I was growing up, a computer game was had a very satisfying taste to my life.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, studying math is so hard. I'm getting nowhere with it. But if I play this computer game, I can kill 7 people and totally recognize the sound of an AK-47.
It's true. It's true. Of course, the dopamine works, right?
Yeah.
And that's why we still put in gamification into atbot.ai
Yeah.
because the gamification part really does keep people going. Now, if the math is really difficult and you're like, oh, I'm going to give up, I'm going to play games, actually the sort of the right way or the game mechanic way of handling a learner with such a situation is to back off, right? Make it easier and then make you feel like, oh, you managed to succeed. Then make it harder and harder, right? So there's a lot of overlaps between game mechanics and learning science. The same thing, if you give a child something too difficult, he's going to give up. If it's too easy, they're bored. So it's like Candy Crush, right? If you still remember that classic game, the puzzle needs to be hard enough for that you feel like you have a shot at it, and if you work hard at it, you can succeed. Not too hard that you will give up, or not too easy that you feel bored.
Yeah.
Right? So actually, a great teacher does exactly the same. So if you're passionate of your game, right, we could actually also incorporate that within the learning part, just that because teachers don't teach one-on-one, and also the time constraint and so on, and that does not fully support a learner. If you really apply that to learning, actually it could be not as bad as what you have experienced before.
I think it's interesting because, it goes back to that core question, which is like, what happens to the kids with no agency? They haven't had the ability to find something they're passionate about. I feel like that's a really good question because I think we already know what the answer is for kids with high agency. Kids with high agency will use AI, they get really focused on some industry, and some of it will be existing industry, some of it will be new industries that come out, but life will be okay with them, and they'll figure it out. And if they're rich, they'll get more of it. And if they're poor, then, it's the job of AI would be a tool for the poor, high agency people to get access to, because it's low cost. But I think what's interesting is for the kids that have low agency and low resource, right? Because kids who are low agency and high resource,
So
I have learned from my junior consultant days, I can create 2x2s and not just do meeting minutes.
So actually, for us, we think about it a lot because perhaps from the outside, you look at what we're doing and you could just put us in the box of, oh, this is just an ed tech. But actually, our core competency is how do we solve for motivation, right? Which is agency, really.
Right.
And motivation, particularly in the context of marginalized communities.
Right.
The marshmallow test that was very famous before, right? You put a few marshmallows, and for some reason, why do, if a kid could wait and have that delayed gratification, this person is likely to be more successful in life versus another kid who can't. But then when they were doing more and more trials, they realized that kids from low-income families are the one who eats the marshmallow first, right? And really it's because that kid, life has trained the kid that he or she didn't know whether he will have a marshmallow tomorrow if he waited, right? So the same thing for motivation for marginalized communities is that if you see people around you work so hard, but still going nowhere in life or still struggling, how do you actually find the motivation to show up? Or around you, nobody is working hard. So nobody's even supportive of you focusing on your education. So how do you find that motivation? So after we tested so many things, we came out and failed many, many times. We came up with this framework called GAIN, GAIN. So gamification, like we talked about earlier. And then A is artificial intelligence, which we put in an AI coach to be there to be your cheerleader, to be your community, to be that somebody who believes in you, because that is actually what is needed, right? We are here because, our parents believe in us, right? But it's not true for everyone. So that A, and then I is incentives. So how do we give that little dopamine hit along the way? Because education is a long game.
Mm.
Right. So we give incentives in terms of like the points that you earn in the game, but also like using the points to exchange for, say, CV review sessions or workshops and things like that. And then last but not least, which is really important, the network around the learner themselves. So how do we create a social network or a community, either virtually with other learners, or we incorporated community elements within our platform so that youth ambassadors can use our platform to motivate the youth around them to learn together, to take up that responsibility to build a vibrant learning community. We also have got village heads being community leaders within self-education. We've got teachers being community leaders within self-education. So each of them manage their own different community, and we support them with the tools on the app. So this game framework, we found like you almost can't do without any of this component. And I think if we just do only the ed tech component, as you have seen, many ed tech fail.
Yeah.
And or have not enough engagement, right? And what we realize is like with this is not only high tech, there's also high touch points, and not necessarily by our team members, but by the community leaders and ambassadors who manage their community.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting because you're like changing the environment from a, environment that's optimized for something else towards optimized towards we all want to learn together, right? I mean, people say what you're the average of the 7 people around you.
Is this old Chinese proverb, I think. So basically, this mother wanted her son to learn, and so she was in the community where the kids are not learning, so she moved the son to another community, to the third community where kids are actually learning, and her son prospered.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas the son was just playing around with the other, in the other communities that weren't passionate about learning. So the environment where you grew up in or who you surround yourself is important. And if you can't find that conducive environment, in real life, physically, can we create that in the virtual sense for you?
Yeah, makes sense. So I guess, wrapping up here, any advice you give to parents who have low agency children?
So I would say, think about how you use the game framework in your real life.
Gamification, AI, incentives, and network.
Exactly. So yeah, and check out at bot.ai. But I mean, I think in all seriousness, what we are doing is suitable for youth, right?
Yeah.
But for younger kids, I think there are different apps that, or it doesn't have to be even an app. It could be just physical, right? If the kids are really young, how do you, reward the child and it doesn't have to be ice cream all the time. Else, you have a very out of control. Really, how do you incentivize your kids a little bit by a little bit, and making sure that the task that you ask them to do is not too difficult or not too easy, and continue to build up from there, and then give them that environment to thrive, right? Think from the younger kids, it's the pedagogical approach, right, where they really still look up to their parents. And so the parents actually play a big influence to the kids in terms of giving that encouragement, and after which is when kids become adolescents, is they're following andragogy, where actually the people around them plays a much more important role. Not to say the parents are not important.
Yeah.
So from that age, it's actually really important to build that community around your child to have that conducive environment, but not forgetting the gamification elements or the incentive element, right? I guess, many parents are saying you need to do your homework first before you go and play. This means that homework is the sucky thing, right? And play is the cool thing.
So what would you say then?
So is there an opportunity to make that learning fun to be with? So that it's not binary, but is there an opportunity to do that? Growing up myself, I have a disproportionate passion for math. And I think it's because my dad made math fun. Like before, if we are in a restaurant, we'll take the peanuts, and then do puzzles.
Yeah.
And make us solve it, while waiting for the food. So therefore, math is fun. So why is learning separated from fun? I think that is the question that we ask ourselves, if we add more fun element into homework, it's not homework anymore, right? My cat, I incentivize her.
Now what did you teach your cat? You promised that at the start of this episode. Now I want to know. What have you taught your cat?
I am a very proud cat mom. My cat has recently made her first debut performance.
Wait, a cat can perform?
It was a comedy night, and there was one extra slot. So my cat, her name is Lady Mew Mew. Lady Mew Mew performed in amongst comedians like Elisa.
Yeah, did like a whole routine?
Routine. So
Wow.
she could shake hands, she could do high fives, she could do high tens, she could turn around, she could jump through the pole, things like that. And how do I teach her? First, I need to find out what she's most motivated by. So she's really motivated not only by snacks, but also by positive reinforcement like good meal meal and things like that. So every time she does something good, I anchor that. Right. And also I make sure that I use the lateness of the forgetting curve. So I need to make her recall the knowledge at appropriate time intervals so that it goes into her short-term, mid-term, long-term memory.
Yeah,
so that is how I get the cat to actually learn, remember her curriculum and perform. Okay. Don't judge me.
Well, it's fine. And now you made me think to myself, like maybe since I have a 5-year-old and 3-year-old daughter.
Oh no, I'm not trying to say.
No. I'm just saying that I think it's a good reminder to me to be like, between the two of them, what and how are their internal motivations different from each other, and how to accommodate that difference, because they're not exactly the same.
It's not one size fit all, and I think sometimes people forget, right, and just read the books and just follow like, oh, this framework and so on. But actually, each child is different.
Yeah, I know one is definitely more food motivated, but now I don't know what the other one is. So I'm just like, this is a fair point. Now I'll be like, oh, okay, probably storybook time or something like that. But
yeah, and how about putting math into the storybook time? Wouldn't that be fun?
how do you make piano fun?
Well,
Put chocolate on every key. Okay, we don't have to solve it right now, but that is a great way to wrap up this episode, and see you next time. See you.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.